Alright, so what I've decided to do, this is the old welder. I had it's kind of a messy solder job, but I used copper pipe, hammered down, and it was difficult to solder this. I had to use like 150 watt iron, but I'm using 10 MOSFETs here, IRS 1405, and we have 1K resistor under the heat shrink right here, and a 10K right there, and then there is a diode here. I'm not sure that that is needed, but I'm going to repackage this up, which I've done. Okay, so let's talk about what we have here. I've got everything labeled. People have been asking for a schematic. This is my schematic. I have aluminum bus bars that I've bent. This goes to the battery. This is going to go to the welder tip. Here are the MOSFETs. They're labeled right here, the type. There are 10 of them arranged in parallel. These are the drains all connected together to the welder tip. And here are all the sources connected together, and they're going to the battery, the negative part of the battery. This is a 12 volt input that will be used to trigger the MOSFET switches, or switch. If we turn this over on the other side, again, I've labeled everything. So here's all the source pins. I should be able to flip it like this. So there's all the sources. There they are there. Okay. Here's all the gates. All the gates are on a piece of 0.02 nickel soldered on. So then again, the gates are all right in here. These are the pins that are bent down through the board. Okay. And then we move on to the drains. These are all the drains right here, which happen to be using the back side of the MOSFETs, which is the drain. Also the center pins, which are a drain as well, those have been all clipped off. Okay. Okay, let's take a closer look at things here. So we have the 12 volt input. The negative is going over to the source rail. Okay. The positive is going to a 1K resistor, which goes over to the gate rail. Okay. And then from there's a 10K resistor also on that gate rail that goes to the source side of things. So two resistors, a 1K and a 10K, and you can see they're both tied in to the same spot here. 10K, 10K, 1K, 1K. Alright, so when the 12 volt input is triggered from the timer, either 2 milliseconds or 3, this whole thing fires off and delivers voltage to the welder tip. In this case, it's going to be on the negative side of things. So that's an overview of everything here. Just using 10 MOSFETs, which I used on my original switch. So this will be all packaged up nicely with a clear plexiglass top. Okay, so here's the setup here. We've replaced the old MOSFET switch, which works perfectly fine, but it's just a mess. So we'll put that aside for a second. And so here's the new switch, the layout. Thanks to Daniel for his creativity. And so everything's mounted up under plexiglass. And so what we have here, just to be clear, is we have a timer. I'll put a link to that from Amazon. You can get others just as long as you make sure that they go under 1 second. You want to be doing milliseconds. On the negative side, there's a wire that runs along the back side here over to the positive side, and that's a diode. Okay. and that's for what they call this flyback situation. Prevent the voltage from coming back into the MOSFETs. I'll put a link into the MOSFET that I'm using there. It's about $23 from DigiKey. So yeah, so the timer's all set up with a foot switch that I've actually transitioned off to the side here, so I can hit it with my knee here. All right, so that's what we have going. So let's weld together nickel strip 0.20. So here we go. And this is doing at 2 milliseconds. So that's what we have there. I am finding that it's best to do it at 3 milliseconds, but 2.0 is fine to go to the battery. This is going to be at 2 milliseconds. The blue tape is just to hold it in place. So I'll put this here and then I'll take the blue tape off. You can see that. And then we'll do a strength test to see how it does with pulling it off. We're trying to pull it off. And I'm finding that depending on the contact, like this I was holding a little bit that way, did seem to do as good as the one when they're pointed down. So I've yet to kind of find the sweet spot for the electrodes. Let's try one just about vertical. Yeah, so you really have to hold those, at least with these electrodes, the way the points are. And this is a special K-weld tips that I inserted into these cables. And I'll leave a link for all that as well. All right, so let's try pulling that off. So we'll try pulling this off with a pair of, these are relatively small pliers, but yeah, I mean it's not going to wiggle off. But I'll pull these off and see what we get. And quite a bit of force here. And there. So it did leave some nickel behind. And I think the technique of holding the electrodes is important. As you can see, this one right up here, I was holding the electrodes more to the side versus a downward. That one didn't stick as much, you can see. The other ones did. So, yeah, I have to work on technique. It's difficult to get those electrodes in there. If anybody has any thoughts about how to hold the electrodes, that would be great.